everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on today's webinar on social emotional learning. My name is Debbie Pixton with the Consortium for Public Education, and I'm here with my colleagues Sarah Brooks and Erin Ultimus, who are helping me run this webinar today. I do have the pleasure and honor to introduce you to our speaker today, Jenny Betz. Jenny is filling in for Dr. Christina Pate, who fell and broke her humerus, which is this bone up here, for those of you who also needed to look that up before you knew for sure. She is in what I assume to be incredible pain and is unable to be with us today, but she highly recommended Jenny to join us in her stead, and we are so honored to have Jenny with us. We know that Jenny will do a great job sharing this information, and we're excited to have her with us. Jenny is a school climate specialist at West Ed and a technical assistance liaison with the National Center to Improve Social and Emotional Learning and School Safety, providing coaching, training, and technical assistance to schools, districts, SEAs, and youth-serving agencies. Betz supports client efforts to assess and improve school climate and wellness with an emphasis on equity, trauma-informed practices, social emotional learning, stakeholder voice, youth engagement, data use, and sustainability. A native of the San Francisco Bay Area, Betz earned a BA in English at St. Mary's College and an MA in Gender Cultural Studies at Simmons College. Today's webinar, as I'm sure you read in the description, will include evidence-based information about social and emotional mindsets and skills that educators can use to rebuild conditions of success for all stakeholders. Using a trauma-informed and healing-centered lens grounded in brain science, strategies will address creating safe and supportive environments, fostering self and collective care, and promoting stakeholder communication, collaboration, and co-design. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. And I'm going to share my screen now. And so thanks so much for having me. Yes, we are bummed that Christine isn't here, but more bummed that she's actually has a broken arm. And, you know, I want to have my like nerd joke about it, but I don't think it's like too soon, right? That like her humerus, it's not really that funny that she broke it. Humorous, funny. So I'm saving that one up. And if you all have better bad jokes that I can, you know, tell her, feel free to put them in the chat at some point. But thanks for having me. Really excited to be able to be here. I work with Christina at the Center to Improve Social and Emotional Learning and School Safety, which is housed at West Ed. The center is a federally funded national center through the Department of Ed. And we do a whole bunch of things across the country, although I am based in Oakland, California, so in the Bay Area. And we do things sort of in a tiered model like MTSS, right? So we have tier 1 things that we do similar to this, right? Sometimes we go and do speaking engagements. We create a lot of different resources on a whole host of different topics around social emotional learning and school safety, things that can go out to the world at large. And then we have work that we're doing more in the tier 2, like that more intermediate, some folks, a smaller group that we have stronger relationships with. We have a number of states that we're working with through a state collaborative that are doing work around alignment and coherence, which is really fascinating. And then at the tier 3, there are some folks where we're doing some more intensive technical assistance. So we're really lucky to be able to work on a whole host of different things. And today I'm happy to be here and talking about creating a culture of care. And a lot of that's going to be about self-care and sort of taking care of our colleagues and our students and our families as a community. So with that, I will keep on going. Today, you know, there's sort of 3 main parts. We're going to give a little bit of info, and then we're going to talk about brain science and the strategies around this. And really, when we're talking about this topic, everything we do is based on how our human brains function, because that then allows us to have strategies that will actually work, given whatever the context is. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. And of course, if you have clarifying questions or other questions along the way, we have folks from CPE monitoring the chat. So feel free to put them in there, and they'll either stop me along the way, or we'll make sure to get to those at the end. And then I think, Debbie, you might have already said this, but for everyone, you'll have access to the slides after this and the recording. And we have a few other links to resources and that sort of thing that we'll share along the way. So with that, we'll go ahead and get going. So let's, in a second, we'll start this poll, Erin, but we're going to do 2 polls. So first of all, I'm curious, how prepared do you feel to really be addressing all the things that are going on that are impacting stakeholders in your district or school? So whether that's students, educators, other staff, family, whatever it is, a lot going on, right? We have the pandemic, which I know we're back to having some pretty big spikes, and that's impacting you all in Pennsylvania a lot. Same here in California. There's the back and forth of, are we in school, are we out of school? Maybe some folks are worried about getting the virus. Some people may have gotten sick or have family members who have gotten sick, and really, God forbid, like, a lot of people have also passed away. So there's so many stressors from that, families who have lost jobs and all sorts of things. And then on top of that, there's been, political things going on that are really stressful. There are, more social things and calls for social justice and racial justice, and just a weird 2020 year that we've had here. So a lot of things going on. Generally, everyone is stressed. Everyone is stressed more than they were. And if you were already stressed, you're like really stressed. So when you think about that in your role and what your district or school is doing, how prepared do you feel to actually be addressing those things for the school community or district community? And we'll go ahead and open that poll for just a little bit. So if you feel totally prepared and you're like, I got this, we're doing great, we're doing all these things, it's a 5. Fairly prepared or fairly unprepared is a 3. Like, not quite sure. But we're doing some things. Totally unprepared is like, I don't even know what you're talking about. What do you mean stress? Or what do you mean that's our job? And then of course, if this doesn't apply to you, we'll do NA. So this is specifically about sort of addressing the stress that's going on with the whole school community or district community. We'll give you a few more seconds to fill this out. Well, most people in this somewhat prepared, and I love the 2% who are like, I got this. I should be the one presenting this thing. So I get it. And a lot of folks in the middle, and that's just the reality. So thank you. And then the second piece is really talking about your own wellness and your stress level, because we can do a lot of things for other people, and any of us who are in education have these types of jobs because we care about other people and want to be helpful, but we got to take care of ourselves too. So how is your wellness doing, and how are you taking care of yourself? So Erin, let's launch that puppy. Oh, that's fascinating. So sort of similar, the vast majority of people are saying the somewhat prepared, but many more people this time saying that they are totally prepared, doing a lot of stuff on their own wellness, which is great. And more folks saying that maybe not really at all doing what I need to take care of myself. So thank you all for that. And that helps give some good information as we move forward in the next 45 minutes or so. Let's see. So there are sort of two things going on, and we talked about this a little bit already, right? For some people, there's all this stress, and at the same time that we're having all this stress and fear and anxiety, we are further away from the networks that often support and sustain us. So our colleagues, the students that we work with, families, that sort of thing, and being home, being socially distant, all that stuff. Makes it harder for us to sort of manage our own stress when we normally, get some buffers and really get support from other people that we may not be able to be around as much or in the same ways. And for other people, this is, a time of great energy and purpose, and like this is, we got to do all this stuff, there's a lot going on, and at the same time we can't actually be with all our students right now, or we can't be with all our colleagues right now, or we can't be in the classroom with the amount of time we want, or get people everything that they want. So there's in both ways a sort of a mismatch between the stress or whatever response it is to this situation we're in, and then our ability to either help support ourselves and others, or actually do the work are really limited. So it's just a really interesting time, and that's why I'm glad that you all are here today. And we're going to really talk a lot about you, and then we're going to talk about how that applies to our colleagues and our students and families as well. So we often talk about having a North Star, that overall you want at least something that you're heading towards. You may not feel a big change from day to day, but you're heading in that direction. What is the thing you're looking at? And when we're talking about today, and hopefully you all can apply this to whatever your work is, we're really looking at having safe and supportive relationships and environments that are really creating conditions where everyone can learn, grow, and thrive, right? That's generally what we want to do at school, especially when we're talking about social emotional learning, which you need to be able to have good academic learning too, and the two go hand in hand. But right now, there's a lot of things that we have to rethink and reconsider and revise as we are in this ever-changing time. And I know that some of you have been in person and still are, and then are probably coming out of in person and not sure when you're going back. Some of you haven't been in person for many months, all sorts of things going on. So as we're going on today, I want you to be thinking about what strategies can you use, but what are also some of the things that you can rethink about how we do school to really be meeting everybody's social and emotional needs. So the first thing we always talk about is self-care. And self-care, there's lots of definitions, but really we're talking about two things. It's paying attention to your own needs, both your social and emotional needs, your psychological health and wellness, and your physical health and wellness. And then also doing something to actually take care of yourself. And as helpers, right, which all of you are, we're all, education is it's a helping profession, right? You wouldn't be in this job, the job that you have, if you didn't care about young people, you didn't care about your community, or whatever piece of the work you do. But it's really important, both in order to be able to do your job really well and meet the needs of the folks that you're working with or working for, but also self-care, I think, and making sure that our own wellness is taken care of isn't just about what that allows us to do for others, but inherently it's important that all of us, that you are healthy and well in all ways, right? That you have this more whole wellness thing in your life, regardless of if that makes you a better parent, which it will, or makes you a better teacher, which it will, or makes you a better counselor, which it will, or makes you a better administrator. Inherently, you as an individual really get to be healthy at the center of who you are. And that is valid in and of itself. That is, I think, just so important that a lot of us forget that we just get to be healthy because that's just how it should be. We should all be able to be like healthy and safe and supported and well. So I hope that today, uh, maybe gives you a couple tools for that, or to be helping other folks who need to hear that message too. And then why do we care, right? So we talk about students being at the center of education all the time, but we also need to talk about the adults being at the center of this, because you really are the key to everything. And so we know that when educators are more stressed or feel less connected or are burning out, right? That there are issues around retention, there are issues around, of course, like our job performance and that sort of thing. If we're super stressed and not in a good place, we're not going to be able to do our jobs well, and we may not stick around for those jobs, which is a huge issue in the education world. Then, of course, that's going to impact, if we're teaching, let's say, it's going to impact how good of a teacher we are, right? And it's going to impact our relationships that we have with young people, and also with our colleagues or families or whoever else we're working with. That again, if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't be our best selves personally or professionally. And then all of this right now, all of these things are true. And we were talking about these things long before the pandemic, but right now, everything is exacerbated and a much bigger stress load on all of us. And so it's even more important. So today we're going to talk about all of this stuff in sort of three pieces related to three things, three concepts. It's regulate, relate, and reason. So this actually comes out of Bruce Perry's work. And throughout, I don't know, at some point we'll give you links to some other things to watch and to read that give more info on all of this, because we want to be able to focus on the strategies and not so much the sort of background info. But what I love about Bruce Perry's work is he's really talking about how the brain functions. And if we think about our brain, just really quickly, like there are sort of three main parts of our brain that are important to think about right now. So our brain stem, right? That's the part of our brain that regulates all of the things that we don't have to actually cognitively think about. It keeps us safe. So it keeps us breathing, keeps our blood pumping, it makes our muscles move, it makes our hormones go. All of those things are happening, from the moment we're in utero, right? That's the first thing to develop. And that's doing all the things that we don't actually have to think about, thank goodness. Because if you had to actually think about like processing oxygen in your blood all the time, like what else would you be doing? It'd be a mess. And then the next part of our brain is like the middle part of our brain. Sometimes it's like, we can talk about the limbic system. Of course, brains are really complex and complicated, so I'm making it pretty simple, like simplifying it. But the next piece up to develop and that's important is our limbic, our sort of feeling brain. And that's the part of our brain that is wanting to know and making sure that it feels connected and loved in a way that it's sort of still survival related, right? That being able to have other people support you and feel safe or feel connected means that you are also safe, right? So those two parts of the brain work really closely together and really fast. Those are things that we're not normally thinking about. It's happening. And then we get to the reasoning, the thinking part of our brain, right? This is our frontal lobe, our prefrontal cortex, whatever piece you want to talk about. And that part is what makes us really uniquely human, right? How much it gets developed. So that's where all of our really complex problem solving goes on, and communication, and, being able to do algebra, and all sorts of other things, right? And the way that it works is that actually it sort of starts at the bottom and then goes up to the front or the top. So you can think about it like the most important thing is keeping you alive, right? That's the regulating part of your brain. The second most important part is making sure that you're sort of safe and connected. That's the relational, emotional thing. And then the third thing is, like, if we're lucky enough to be alive and connected and safe, great, we can think about algebra now. So that's sort of these three pieces that connect. And so we're going to talk about self-care and community care in terms of addressing what's going on when you have stress in either of these three parts of the brain. So here's another poll. First poll. So when we talk about, for one sec, sorry. So with regulation, in that bottom part of our brain, what often we say, we want to be regulated, right? We want things to just feel safe and they're just happening and everything's okay. And when something's off, either, in some part of that brain, we talk about being dysregulated. So there's something going on either emotionally or whatever that we're not able to really be in our thinking brain. We're stuck in this feeling and sort of worrying danger brain. So the question is, does your agency have any training in place that really is talking about the brain and dysregulation and what we do if we see and recognize dysregulation in ourselves or others? And we'll open that poll. I'm not surprised at all at these results. You probably aren't either. I love the 12% of you who have that already going, and you may even be the people who are leading that work. And then a lot of us either aren't getting that training or I don't know, which probably means it's not available, right? So it's such an important thing, understanding our brains, but until maybe recently, and still not necessarily in every place, like your teacher credential programs, administrator programs, school counseling programs aren't necessarily, maybe school counseling, but aren't necessarily talking about all that brain-based stuff, but that's like the heart of everything. So thank you for that. The next one is just about how you're feeling in terms of creating and sustaining relationships during this social distance time. Because then I know I'll talk a little bit more about the brain and we'll see how we're feeling about relationships, and we can decide. Okay. Again, similar sort of pattern. These things go together. That's great. We'll keep on going. Maybe if I can click the slide. There you go. Okay. So let's talk about the regulation, right? This is the bottom part of our brain. Again, you can look at those. We have links to webinars that we've done, and some briefs on information to go into this more. But when we're talking about regulation, emotional regulation, it looks different for everybody because our brains are different, our experiences have been different, and so we respond differently to stimuli or stress. It also may look different in young people than it does in adults, although not always. And what you would do to help regulate yourself may look different, right, across ages, but also culturally and regionally and ethnically, those sorts of things. Not necessarily because there's like a physical, like anatomical difference, but that there are different ways that we understand stress and have experienced stress and then deal with stress. So what stress looks like to you and what helps you regulate might not work for, one of your students or a parent or a colleague. And then because of that, we want to think about always that sometimes what we think is the right way to do things may be the right way for us, but may not really be the right thing for someone else. And that when our behavior, when we see behavior in other people and it isn't the same as ours. Sometimes we think that it's because something's wrong with them, but that may just be because we have blinders on and think, I often think that I'm right, and that how I am dealing with things or how I feel is the right or the normal way. But if we're not considering sort of other cultural differences and developmental differences, then we might then be misunderstanding the behavior of other people, and therefore not be able to support them in the ways that they need. So some of the things we can do to help regulate ourselves and students, right, are things that are more like grounding and structure and consistent. Like I said, the regulation is about those parts of our brain that are looking for danger and keeping us safe and keeping us connected, right? For safety reasons. So the more consistent you can be, and the more you can have routines and those sorts of things, the better it's going to be in your own life and in your students' lives and at home, right? Like if you have a, if you're a parent, you probably know that when you have a set bedtime and you actually get on a schedule that, like, your kids go to bed at a reasonable time, right? And they get used to it, you have many fewer issues the next day when they get enough sleep, right? So it's similar, like when we can expect and we know that we go to bed at 8:30 every night, then also we may not get so upset when a parent tells us to go to bed at 8:30 because we're expecting it. So it's finding all these ways to make things more routine and consistent so there's fewer times to get upset or dysregulated. And then as much as possible, creating those sort of connection and welcoming things. So, in person, I'm sure you all have heard a lot about, simple things like greeting students at the door when they're coming into your classroom. The last few years, a lot of people have been talking about like giving high fives or a special handshake with every student. We're not doing that these days, and not a good idea, but eventually maybe it'll be like special elbow bumps or things like that. So what are the things that students or even our colleagues feel in a moment that, like, oh, I'm safe, here's someone who sees me and I'm okay and I can move forward with whatever I'm doing? And then a few other things just sort of biologically that we need to stay regulated is movement. Getting up, having brain breaks, being able to understand that not just young people, especially young people, but for adults too, that like just sitting in front of Zoom for 6 hours, let alone 30 minutes, right? Just isn't what's going to be best for everybody, right? You need to move, you need to get your body moving, doing things like movement across your body, across the midline, things like that really can help us regulate our brains. And then there are things around, things that we can learn to do sort of ahead of time so that in the moment, if we're getting dysregulated, we can call upon those skills. That's a lot of things we talk about in social emotional learning, right? What are the calm down skills that students can have that if they can start to recognize like, oh, I'm getting upset, I can now use this tool, which is journaling or going and getting a fidget or taking a walk or going to the quiet corner or whatever, breathing, whatever it needs to be. And that's the same for all of us. And breathing really is a huge one. I have a colleague who would always say, your breathing is like the remote control of your body and your brain. So if you're really upset, really heightened or stressed out, breathing physically, like using your thinking brain to make yourself slow down your breathing and get like more regulated breathing will actually help calm down everything else. But if you haven't learned that ahead of time, right, then, and you get really stressed, you don't have those things to call on. So the things that we need to do in the moment to be able to calm down are actually things that we have to work on ahead of time so we have those skills in the moment. So in the chat box, what do you already do, whether you knew it was for this purpose or not, that like helps either regulate you or helps your students regulate? What's already working? What are some of the things you're seeing, and what's been hard? And we'll just look at some of the chat responses here. Yeah, the stress is making things a lot more difficult. Taking a walk, yes, brain breaks, but staff don't want to give up the instructional time. I know. Stretching anywhere, yes. Um, Having someone to share with, girl time, whatever it is, for sure. We're missing that. We're missing just the in the hallway connection, or while you're making copies, or you're in the, the teacher's lounge, or whatever it is. We're missing all those moments of connection too. Taking breaks, meditation, chair yoga, talking with other people. And so Sarah Brooks just wrote, exercise outside helps calm my brain. So that the more we can learn about ourselves to understand what really helps. Taking time, yes, finding things around gratitude. Oh, I love watching children engage with each other. Yeah, it like brings you back to like, oh wait, why do I do this? Like, I actually care about kids. Like, it's awesome. In my family, we're all working or doing school from home. So we're on Zoom, in 3 different rooms of the house all the time. And my wife is a intervention lead elementary school, and then is also their district SEL person, and does a bunch of other things. And so she often will go into like morning meetings with like the little ones, and sit in or lead circles or whatever on Zoom. And so I just listening makes me like calm down myself. I'm like, oh, they're just so dang cute. And it really sort of helps connect. So any of those things that help you feel better. Okay, we are gonna keep on. So now, what's interesting is we'll talk about relationships and relating, that sort of more emotional part of our brain. And again, the regulation and the relating are very connected for sure. And also, so, you've heard that we respond to stress or trauma in fight, flight, or freeze, those sort of responses. And we'll talk a little bit about those. And one thing also to know about the 3 parts of the brain is that the 2 bottom parts work a lot faster. So in a moment of potential danger, whether it's really danger or not, something that our brain thinks might be dangerous, it is gonna protect us and look for safety and make sure we're okay way before, I mean, in milliseconds, right? But like before we can actually cognitively realize whether that threat is real or not. So you hear, your smoke alarm goes off and you jump up and like all your stress goes up, right? And your heart starts beating and whatever. And it takes a second for your thinking brain to catch up and say, oh, wait, it's just because something on the stove is smoking and not that my house is burning down. So that's why also, if we understand why we do that, why our brains are doing that, it can help us then think through it. So all of that behavior, all of the ways that we react to things, are also ways to understand other people and ourselves. And so if we're seeing the fight, flight, or freeze, or whatever those dysregulation things are, to try and take a moment to understand where that's coming from, and that you may not have jumped at the fire alarm, but someone else might have and be really upset about it. And so, we don't ever want to say like, come on, it's just it's just a drill, it doesn't matter. But instead, wow, that really upset you. You're safe. I'm here. We're okay. I'll be here with you. And then we can talk through it, right? So it's sort of recognizing that we all may have different reactions to things. And then right now in particular, because we have such weird sort of ways that we're interacting with people online or in these other social distance spaces, it's really important that we um, do more like intentional things to create connections, so that brains feel safe and engaged and therefore can learn and think. So that may be having, students having a small group that they always connect with, or doing, I know CPE does a lot of project-based learning. So having ways to connect that are set in, so that it's not just, a student who shows up on Zoom however often, but never actually connects with someone. So that's also important for our staff. Someone, had wrote around the regulating things that, like, as school folks, we're like running, and anything we do seems like it will either take out of learning time or take out of our other productive time or whatever. But if we are missing the moments to connect and be regulated, we can't actually do the learning right or the teaching right either. So we want to make sure that we're taking care of those parts of our brains, so that those parts of our brains then let us actually do algebra. So again, some things to help. Any like little personal touches, right? Saying hi to everyone in your class, even on Zoom, putting little emojis, doing whatever little things, and making sure that your staff meetings, that your classes, that whatever you're doing have opportunities for interaction. Even these little polls on Zoom is not a lot, right? If we were in person, we would be talking a lot more, and I would be hearing from you a lot more. But anything to kind of make sure that folks are connected, because that also then again helps us connect to our thinking brain. And then right now, really thinking about what our boundaries are, and what our expectations are for ourselves, for our colleagues, and for students. That right now, being connected and healthy and engaged is more important than all the minute details of like getting an assignment in on time, right? Or trying to push curriculum that really isn't going to fit into the way we're doing things right now. And yes, we want everyone to get an education and all of that, but it is a different time right now, and we need to focus on people's well-being. And that may mean that we're not getting to everything in our lesson plans. But what that also means is that you can actually do things so whatever part of the lesson plan you do get to, students are actually learning and engaging with it cognitively, instead of still being dysregulated and then not really learning anything. And then lastly around that is that it's really important for ourselves to be able to say what our boundaries are, and that it's okay, and to learn to listen to other people. So this can be around your stress level. Sometimes at the end of the day, especially when I'm like on Zoom all dang day, it gets to a point around 3:30 where sure, I can still listen to things, but if you want me to actually like be thoughtful right now, or like brainstorm or whatever, I'm like, my brain is just done. It doesn't matter if I still have to work till 5 or 6, like technically, right? My brain isn't going to produce anything else. So being able to say that and be honest about it, or to say, wow, this is too much, I need a break, is important. And that's also important for all of the social distancing things. I'm constantly, our son is almost 15. He'll be 15 in like 2 weeks. He's a freshman in high school. And we've drilled into him the whole wearing a face mask thing, and he is really great about it. But we're always trying to help him figure out in social situations, because he goes out and skateboards with friends, how do you have the conversation with your friends around, no, I can't go in your car or your house because my parents are like, no, no, I'm not gonna like shake your hand or give you the hug or whatever all the time. And I'd really like it if you wore a mask, right? Those are all really hard conversations for young people. It's also hard for us and our families, right? Do we go to that holiday thing? Do we not? We know that whatever cousin isn't ever going to wear the mask, or whatever it is, right? Like, how do we set our own boundaries and be okay with them and just say, this is what I need, and also encourage and respect other people's, especially around the health stuff. It's really, really hard right now. It really is. So when we're talking about relating and connecting and all of those sort of social things, what's working and what's challenging? So off the cuff emails, phone calls with friends, saying no. Has there ever been a time in your life where you were more excited to say no to stuff than now? Like, I used to think saying no to things was great already, but now I'm like, I don't even want to go out of my house. Like, no way I'm going to the grocery store. I'll just order it. Or like, no, I don't need to do that. Or no, it's so great. Um, oh goodness. Those of you who are at home and turning it off is really hard. Yes. At least if you're at your school site or your district site and you drive home, it you get a break there a little bit, and then maybe have home responsibilities that keep you from just going back and doing work. But when it's home, it's really hard. I keep getting up earlier and earlier just to get a head start. But then my 3:30 brain crash becomes like a 3:15 brain crash, and then a 3 o'clock brain crash. And I'm like, but I got up at 5, and everyone else is like, but we're still working. So you got to work those things out. Yes, those who are introverts, it is a good time. I'm like half and half, and my introvert is like singing and happy, and I've gotten all new obsessive hobbies and all sorts of fun stuff, and I'm like, don't talk to me, people. Not seeing family, biggest challenge. Like, we're hardwired for connection. That's why that second part of the brain that we're talking about is about relating and having connections. It's just so important, and we have to work so much harder right now to get those connections, and they're never going to be enough right now. They're just not. Yeah, reminiscing is really important. And also, if reminiscing is making you sad, don't do it, right? So whatever is going to work for you. Yeah, we can't do the basic things, right? That like give us also ways to process things, right? A wedding is a great thing and positive. You have all these connections, but also there's so many people who are really struggling. If there's a death in the family, you can't process it in the same way. You can't be in the space in the same way with people. And, it's just so hard. And those of us who have family who are ill or in like nursing facilities, that's a whole other thing. So many people, it's already been something we don't always talk about, how much we're taking care of other people in our family. But when you also can't visit them, and maybe they understand or don't, like there's just all these extra stresses for sure. So lastly, want to talk about reasoning. That's once we're regulated, right? And we're safe, and our brain's like, all right, cool, we're good. We're just pumping our, heart and moving our chemicals around in our brain, and we're fine. You go ahead and do your algebra or staff meeting or reflection form or whatever. In order to sort of stay in that place and not dysregulate yourself, we need to be gentle with ourselves and realistic. Again, you're not going to be able to get through every single thing that you would normally get through. So what is the reality of what we can get done and what are the priorities right now when we don't have all the same resources of time and space, or that's fluctuating a lot. And then, all those things that you learned when you were younger, like study skills and work habits and things like that, that sometimes we just get really busy and we're either just doing them and don't think about them, or we're maybe not doing them and we're just running ourselves ragged, are really important because we need the consistency and all the help we can get because our brains are dealing with a lot of things right now. Even if we don't really know it, this is all really stressing us out. And then giving a pause a little bit, just like, I said, those bottom parts of our brains that react to stimulus really quickly and react to potential danger are way faster than when we can decide logically whether that was a smoke alarm because of the stake or a smoke alarm because the house is burning down. The first thing that comes out of our fingers when we're typing, especially if we're a little agitated, may not actually be the thing that, if we give it a few minutes to think about it or till the next day, is really what we want to send out. Because the first thing that's coming out, if you're dysregulated at all, is going to be things from this like safety, safety, danger. I'm going to just say something that probably might not come off so great to other folks. And then just to remember things around mindsets and mindfulness, not in a religious or spiritual way. I think some people have gotten sort of worried about that. So if you're hearing those things when you talk about mindfulness in schools, it's not that. It's that being able to be present and actually understand what's going on with your body and brain, and being able to help yourself calm down is really important. Also things like gratitude. Someone had written something in the chat. There's so much research around gratitude and how just talking about what you're grateful for, what is going well in your life, and doing that in consistent ways actually has all these really meaningful scientific outcomes in terms of our well-being and our physical health as well. And then remember that we impact other people with our emotions, and they impact us, and it can be contagious. And so sometimes you're like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way, but it's because someone on the other side of Zoom or in the other classroom was dysregulated. And just to be able to, again, pay attention to those things and see where they're coming from. And last little things are being flexible, being compassionate, having gratitude. All of those things are really helpful when we can be thoughtful about it, right? To keep us regulated. We already talked about some boundaries. The last thing I want to say before we take some questions or wrap up here is, we talked about boundaries in terms of time and workload and expectations for other folks, and even space and health things. But we also need to have some boundaries around information. So how much news are we watching? How much have you researched about what the vaccines are? How much have you researched in the last 2 days about what the side effects are of the second shot of the vaccine? Like, I know you all have been Googling that, right? Because it's all in the news. Or, were you at the election, like, obsessively every minute refreshing your thing that was saying what the percentages were, especially in a state like Pennsylvania? My goodness, we were all doing that watching yours and the rest of the country. But that may not actually have been helpful to you, right? So being able to like take a break from those things and be like, you know what, there's not actually going to be any more news that is that big of a deal the rest of tonight. So I'm going to put my phone away for right now, or stop looking at Facebook. So actually, we're going to hold that, because I think just now, like, I'm curious what other questions are coming up, or other things do you want to share? I think this is not just about me talking, but you all sharing what's really working for you. And along with that, letting you know that if you need professional help, if you think things are really getting so stressful that it's really impacting your life, ask for help. So there are lots of organizations out there. I don't know the local ones in Pennsylvania, but I'm sure whatever district or school you work for has things, and there are lots of different stuff that you can look at. There's of course things online that you can go to really easily. And also, it's normal to be upset right now, and that's okay. But if you feel like it's getting too much, or you're worried about someone else, definitely reach out to them as well. So what are you thinking at the end of this? We have a few more minutes. Oh, good. We're getting some links in there. The news. Yeah. Like, what is coming up for folks in our last few minutes here?
I just wanted a quick shout out to Bethany, who shared a great video on gratitude in the chat.
Awesome.
And Sarah is sharing a few things both from WestEd and from YouTube. I'm not sure if that's the video that your team worked on, Jenny, or if that's another one. Sarah is nodding yes. So those are all from your team then, Jenny.
Cool. And the gratitude stuff, you know, a great place is the Greater Good Center, Greater Good Learning Center out of UC Berkeley. They're amazing. They have a lot of stuff on gratitude, really on all of these things. They have all this Greater Good Science Center. That's what it is. Fantastic free resources, videos, all sorts of things. Really, really great around all that stuff. Oh my goodness, snail mail. I wish I would get something that wasn't just a bill in the mail. So yeah, I've been so excited to get like holiday cards. I never really, I'm like, whatever, most years, but I'm like, this is the best one. Oh yeah, mailing things to coworkers. In the beginning, I don't know if any of you all did, any of your schools did this, but I know in the beginning of the pandemic, like last spring, there were a lot of places that were doing sort of like teacher appreciation drive-bys, which were just so sweet. And I don't know how much we've all kept up some of those early things that we did as we've just gotten more and more sort of beat down by all this stuff. Okay, well, with our last moment here, I just want to thank CPE for inviting us and thank you all for allowing me to be here and on behalf of the Center to Improve Social Emotional Learning and School Safety at WestEd and our partners. So WestEd, RAND, Transforming Ed, and CCSSO. Really happy to be here today. I hope you are well and take care of yourselves and have a great rest of the winter.
Thank you again, everyone. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank
and
you.
we'll see you all next time.